In the early 20th century, Detroit was booming. Today, we'd compare it to Silicon Valley, but in truth, California was never this lucky. The 1920s found the city at the center of a transformative new technology, the automobile. Like the microchip, it changed everything it touched, upending old industries and giving birth to new ones. Structures like the Penobscot Building and the Ambassador Bridge went up as quickly as new workers for the factories poured into the city. But the decade ended with a crash. First on Wall Street, then on Main Street. Detroit, like the rest of the world's economies, hit the wall hard. Unemployment soared as auto sales cratered. The collateral damage spread, and the Great Depression settled in. And in the depths of this disaster, Alan Crow, the economic forecaster for Sibley Lumber, had an idea. Maybe if you gathered a lot of smart people in one room on a regular basis, they could think their way out of the Depression's downward spiral. The informal group was nicknamed the Gloom Club, for obvious reasons. They met for lunch on Saturdays at the Penobscot Club. From their vantage point atop the Penobscot, they considered their city and its economic predicament. They exchanged information and ideas, looking for anything that might point the way out. Alan Crow had ambitions for the Gloom Club. He wanted to bring in speakers who knew more than the membership. For that, it needed to be larger. Crow, a man accustomed to study, success, and what we now call networking, became the spark behind it all. In July 1934, he sent letters to 100 business leaders in the city, asking if they might be interested in forming a club similar to one in Chicago. They would invite speakers, bankers, executives, government leaders, diplomats, anyone who might have information or ideas that could point a way out of the mess they were in. 46 men responded, and by fall, they had become the founding members of the Detroit Economic Club. Their first speaker was an economist from the University of Detroit. His speech established the template that has existed more or less unchanged since. Lunch, 30 minutes allotted to speaking, 15 more for questions and answers, adjournment. The club was on its way. Mondays were for lunch at the Book Cadillac Hotel, and whatever speaker had traveled by train over the weekend to address them. They looked at labor issues, the Supreme Court, diplomacy, the United States' role in world affairs. From the beginning, they aimed high. Speakers came not just from Detroit, but from around the country and overseas. Crow prided himself on the club's foresight. The secret is the timeliness of the speakers, he would say. Catherine Curtis was the first woman to address the club in 1937. Board member Harvey Campbell nominated her, writing to Crow, "The idea of having a woman talk to a bunch of men interested in economics and sticking to her subject would certainly be a novelty." As the economy improved, the podium was dominated by concerns about distant thunder in Europe and elsewhere. Well before Pearl Harbor, the club considered the aggressive regimes in Japan and Germany and what they might mean for America's people and businesses. This continued through World War II, although, typical of the club's foresight, by 1943 they were already examining post-war issues. In 1945, the war ended. The Cold War began, and the club continued to be timely, looking at communism, transportation, suburban development, architecture, labor issues, politics, and diplomacy. By the end of the 1950s, the Detroit Economic Club was finishing its first quarter century as the spectacular fulfillment of its founders' wishes. It was an institution of learning and lively debate. It was a credit to a thriving city that had gone through a depression and 2 wars and emerged stronger than ever. Membership was growing. Its speakers were prominent and worthy of the attention they drew. Crow had grown into his dream job, running the club that had been his brainchild in 1934. Bigger things lay in store for the club, even as the city faced a decade that would change it forever.